The film that Katie and I had been watching for the past 2 hours finally concluded. I had had a bit too much beer, but Katie seemed to enjoy it. As I sat beside her, I couldn't quite grasp it. John, how could a husband be so stubborn that he couldn't understand or forgive his wife for such a minor mistake? What do you mean it wasn't a minor mistake? For heaven's sake, she cheated on him. Any wife who cheats on her husband deserves whatever consequences come her way. It's unacceptable in any context. That's just awful and cruel, John. A loving husband would be more forgiving. He would recognize that her infidelity doesn't mean she doesn't love him, it means her feelings for him are less strong than they should be. A wife who cheats is effectively showing that she has no respect for her husband and feels no remorse for humiliating him, even if it's not apparent on his face. To her, he's still lesser. What if that's not her intention? It doesn't matter what her intentions are, Katie. What matters is that she did it, and the outcome is inevitable. That's nonsense, John. I can't believe you're so old-fashioned. These things can be discussed and resolved. There's never a need for revenge from the husband's side. That's only applicable if the wife confesses to cheating before her husband catches her. If he finds out before she tells him, she's doomed. If she denies it after being caught, she should be burned at the stake. Most husbands pay so little attention to what their wives do that few of them ever get caught. This is a silly argument. I'm going to get ready for bed. I'll be there in a few minutes. Katie and I spent most of the day at flea markets and yard sales. I didn't mind dragging her along every weekend because I could usually find something to look at while she dug through the stands. She collected old cast iron items. The uglier they looked, the more she wanted them. We both worked and saved as much money as we could for our first home. Of course, it had to have a big kitchen with enough wall space for at least a 100 stove plate. We'd only been married for 6 years, but we'd been together for a few years before that. She was short and a bit stout. I often teased her about her wide hips. We planned to have a few kids once we moved into the new house. Right now, all we needed was enough money for an 80% discount. I finished an article in a magazine, but I couldn't shake off the conversation we'd just had. Katie seemed too defensive about the topic of cheating. It had never been discussed before. In fact, I had never even considered such a possibility. But now it caught my attention. Most of the guys I work with keep their wives on a short leash. Katie wasn't controlled at all. I always trusted her and never doubted her faithfulness. I never thought of cheating on her and hoped she felt the same way about me. Anyway, I decided a little digging wouldn't hurt. I was sure I wouldn't find anything, but just to be sure, I'd look. I worked from 6 to 4, and Katie from 8 to 6, which gave me some time to figure things out. The next morning, I slipped out of work around 9 o'clock and popped into the apartment. I didn't know what I was looking for, but it was starting to seem amusing, sort of like a secret garbage hunt. I couldn't start because I sensed a strange, sweet smell as soon as I walked in the door. It was air freshener, lots of air freshener. I wandered around, sniffing, trying to figure out what was going on. Eventually, I ended up by the fireplace in the living room. Katie must have burned something in the fireplace and tried to cover the smell of smoke with room air freshener. The bottom of the fireplace was clean and looked like it had just been swept. The black soot on the bricks was still wet. If she had burned something and cleaned up, there had to be traces somewhere. I figured if she were smart, she would have taken it to work with her. She wasn't smart. In the trash can in the garage, I found a plastic liner from a waste paper basket. I spread newspapers on the kitchen table and emptied the contents of the bag. It was mostly just black ash, but there were small scraps of paper and a few photos mixed in. I'd like to say I managed to piece together some fragments into something readable, but that wasn't meant to be. All I really knew was that she had decided it was important to burn some old papers and photos so I wouldn't find out. This meant something was happening that she didn't want me to know about. After last night's conversation, I started to worry. My whole life had been dedicated to Katie and the future we were building together. Now, it seemed I had been a bit careless in observing what was going on around me. She hadn't been honest with me about certain aspects of her life. I knew very little about her job or her work colleagues. I never thought I needed to know. Well, now she had my attention. On the way to work, I stopped by the store and bought 3 voice-activated digital recorders and extra batteries. The cell phone company was more than happy to provide me with printouts of calls for the last 3 months from both our wireless devices. I explained that the tax office was conducting an audit and we needed the information for deduction verification. I requested both phones to make it seem less suspicious, but after checking mine, I tossed it into the shredder at work. For the first time since I got married, I started to have doubts about my wife. I didn't like it, but I couldn't ignore it. I came home a few hours earlier than Katie and managed to set up the recorders in the living room, bedroom, and kitchen. I had to set up the kitchen one not to record the fridge's work. I turned them on every morning before leaving for work. Dinner was ready when Katie came home. "Hey, honey, I hope chili works for you." "Sounds good, as long as it's not too spicy." About halfway through the meal, I started to probe. "Hey, when I got home, there was a terrible smell in the house. It was something between lilac and burnt rubber. What did you burn in the fireplace before going to work?" She was caught. She tried to hide the fact that she burned things, but now it was out in the open. "Oh, nothing special. Just some old papers and school supplies." "Why did you burn them? Why didn't you just throw them in the trash or run them through the shredder? The way you cleaned the fireplace seemed like you were preparing for forensic investigators." "I don't know. Why is it so important, Katie?" "I find it very strange that you woke up this morning, got ready for work, burned a bunch of old school papers, and then cleaned everything up so it looked like it never happened. Are you blaming me for being suspicious? Also, it didn't look like schoolwork but rather like letters and photos. What did you do? Go through the trash and dig up this junk just to accuse me of something?" "Yes." "Fine. You do the dishes. I'm going to take a shower, get into bed, and read." Katie had never talked to me like this before, but then again, I had never accused her of anything before. A few seconds later, the shower turned on. I grabbed her cell phone from her purse and copied all the speed dial numbers, all outgoing calls, all incoming calls, and all messages. It took just a few minutes to scan her address book into a computer file. I didn't mind sleeping on the couch, but the living room still smelled of lilac and smoke. I had plenty of free time at work, so I took the day off. I turned on the recorders and left the house at the usual time. But instead of going to work, I went to Danny's. A little after 8, I returned home. Katie made one phone call. "I have some issues at home." "No, nothing like that. He just suspects that something's going on but has no idea what exactly. He's just annoying and really starting to get on my nerves." "Okay, I think I can handle this. Maybe on Friday. See you." I had no idea who the mysterious person on the other end of the line was, but I figured I'd find out soon. I wondered what was supposed to happen on Friday. I spent the morning at the library going through her phone calls. I could have done it at home, but the reverse phone directory at the library was better than the internet and faster, of course. For mobile phones, it cost nothing. I was able to eliminate most of the numbers because I knew them or could match them to her address book. One particular number stood out. It was on her speed dial and in her address book. The address book also listed a landline number, which, as it turned out, belonged to Tom Rowland. Katie worked with him, and I had actually met him a few times. The last time was about 10 days ago at a corporate event. He and Katie were close all evening, and I remembered I didn't like it. He was married to a cute little brunette who also didn't seem to have much fun at the party. I made a couple of copies of the phone list and went to Tom Rowland's house. I figured I had nothing to lose, so I knocked on the door. "John Connor," I said, "I was hoping to talk to you." "It was an unexpected surprise," she replied. "I'm sorry, I know I'm at a disadvantage here. I know you're married to Tom, but I don't think we've ever met." She said, "My name is Sylvia, but everyone calls me Sly." She extended her hand, and I shook it out of politeness. John, the only thing I need to talk to you about is the affair your wife and my husband are having. Wow, she hit me straight in the face. Again, I didn't expect this either. It seemed she knew much more than I did. I'm filing for divorce from Tom and citing Katie's name in the petition. I have a lot of supporting documents and I'd like to collaborate on a few matters, she continued. Sylvia, I have no intention of causing you trouble over this, but I only found out about it yesterday. I don't have any information that could help you. The only thing I have right now is a few phone logs. Can I see them? She asked. She genuinely seemed concerned about the little I had. I handed her one of the copies and told her she could keep it. Sylvia began examining the phone logs like an IRS auditor. She made notes in the logs and cross-referenced the information with the documents she had. She smirked, and I thought she might burst into laughter at any moment. The more she worked on it, the more animated she seemed. Is there any information you can share with me? Of course. I'm willing to give you everything I have here. This is what I've gathered over the past 2 weeks. She pushed 3 motel receipts across the table to me. They had dates, times, and, of course, the name of the motel. All 3 were different and all 3 were paid in cash. The idiot doesn't realize. I rummage through all his pockets every night after he goes to sleep. I take the receipts, and he doesn't even notice they're gone. He lives in his own little world, I'm invisible to him. As we talked, she seemed to become more and more agitated. I started to worry a bit about my safety. I hoped she wouldn't get upset with me because I was Katie's husband. Veins bulged on her neck like a television wrestler. I don't think I've ever seen a woman so enraged. I have a lot more receipts and other things if you need them. Oh, wait, let me show you something special. She left and returned shortly with a zippered bag. Inside were a couple of women's items. Do you recognize these? Of course, in the bag were items that belonged to a set of my wife's. I took them out of Tom's coat pocket on the night of the last corporate party. He went crazy rummaging through the closet and the car trying to find them, but he didn't dare say a word to me. Can I borrow them? Only if you promise to return them. Agreed. For the next hour, Sylvia Rollins rambled and raved like a possessed person. I tried to leave several times, but I couldn't. Finally, she said she needed to lie down for a bit and gave me a chance to leave. She mentioned that Tom hated protection and refused to use it. When Katie came home, I had dinner ready. I was hungry because I had skipped lunch. My wife was as cool as a cucumber. I realized why I hadn't noticed anything before. I cleaned up the dishes and put out a couple of slices of key lime pie, her favorite, and some coffee. It was quiet and peaceful. Katie, can I ask you a question without you getting mad at me? Sure. Are you still doing chimney business? No, it's something else. All right, go ahead. Where's the thing that goes with this shirt? I lifted up the gray-green push-up bra that matched the panties given to me by Sylvia. I don't know. Probably in my dresser. Why are you rummaging through my stuff? Are you turning into some kind of weirdo? Could you go get those items for me? Katie just sat there and stared at her pie. She couldn't reach them and she knew it. You know, I just remembered I threw them out last week. The elastic band came off, and I just didn't feel like fixing them. They were less than a month old. Katie, you bought them at the mall just 3 weeks ago. How did they wear out so quickly? Now she started to simmer. Her lower lip trembled, the veins in her neck bulged, and her fists were clenched tightly. I felt like I was back with Sylvia. All right, Mr. Know-It-All. You tell me what happened to my things. Last week, as we were getting ready to go to your company party, I watched you getting dressed. You put on these 2 little items that go with them. I remember thinking how good you looked. When we got home from the party, you undressed in the bathroom, but I noticed you weren't wearing them. Did you manage to lose them from the time we left home until we got back? I think you're mistaken. They were indeed with me when I got home. You just didn't see them. Okay, then tell me, how did they end up in Tom Rollins' coat pocket? I lifted the bag with those items. Where did you get them from? Tom's wife, Sylvia. Why are you asking? Stop poking your nose where it doesn't belong. There's nothing between Tom and me. I have no idea how his wife got my stuff. Do you have any other nonsense you want to throw at me? Just one more thing, Katie. Here's a little questionnaire I've put together. I'd like you to fill it out. All I want to know is the date and place where you met other men outside of our marriage. Here, I'll start it off for you. As Katie watched, I entered the name of the motel and the date they last met with Tom. In the next line, I simply entered Tom's name and the name of the motel. In the next line, I just put the date. Fill this out for me, Katie, and then we'll talk some more. She knew the information. I entered the form accurately. Katie just stared at the paper, not moving or saying anything. Oh yes, one more thing, I said, raising my voice. I'm a bit angry that you and Tom didn't bother to use any protection. It's disgusting that you cheated on me, but it's even worse that you didn't have the decency to use protection. You didn't have any qualms about bringing home some disease. That's truly disgusting. No, it was only Tom, she replied. The room became very quiet. I hadn't expected such an outburst, and I don't think Katie had thought about what she was saying until it was too late. In her anger, she unintentionally revealed that she had affairs with other guys besides Tom. I just assumed. With a wave of her hand, Katie swept half the table off and stormed out of the kitchen. I heard the bedroom door close and quiet sobbing. I went to the motel for the night. I called in sick to work and said I wouldn't be in for a few days. I returned Sylvia's evidence as promised. This time, she didn't say anything and seemed very subdued. I didn't push it and left as soon as I could. I found a small motel that rented rooms with mini kitchens by the week. Katie wasn't home when I drove by, so I ducked inside and grabbed as much of my stuff as I could. I bought some silverware, plates, and a few pots and pans. It took me about an hour to set up my new place. I couldn't shake the feeling that just a week ago, I had no idea something like this would happen. As I started to head to my car, I noticed Tom Rollins about 5 doors down from me. He was bringing bags and boxes of stuff into the room. I had to laugh to myself, he was doing the same thing I was. Either Sylvia had kicked him out or he had had enough and left. It didn't matter, but the results were the same. About that time, Katie's car pulled up. She didn't see me and didn't notice my car. They talked for a bit and then went into the room. About 10 minutes later, I figured it was time to go home and get the rest of my stuff. I was sure they would be occupied for at least an hour. I was loading out my Honda with everything I could when there was a knock on the door. Mr. Connor? 2 police officers stood at the door. Yes? Are you Katie Connor's husband? Yes. Is everything okay with her? Did something happen? I'm sorry to have to tell you this, sir, but your wife has passed away. No, you must be mistaken. I saw her just 2 hours ago, and she was fine. Where did you see her? She was at the Desk Motel on Penn Avenue with Tom Rollins. Mr. Rollins is also deceased. How did that happen? They were both murdered. Mrs. Rollins was responsible for both deaths. She attacked them as they were leaving his room. After committing the crime, she called the police. When we arrived, she was sobbing by the door. Are you all right, or do you need someone to stay with you? I'll be fine. Thanks. Does anyone want to buy a stand? Just a week ago, everything seemed normal. What changed? I was under the impression that